He kissed me behind the pulpit on a Sunday night. His hands smelled like anointing oil, his breath like peppermint, and every part of me screamed that this was wrong. But when he whispered, "You make me feel alive again," I believed him. I believed every word, until the offering money started disappearing, and his wife found the ledger. What she did next made the whole town tremble. To all my beautiful subscribers, thank you for sticking around. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button to help me bring more real-life dramatic stories just like this one. Your support helps me tell the truth, even the ugliest parts of it. My name is Ellie Mae Carter, and I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who sleeps with a married pastor. But here I am, telling this story not for sympathy, but because truth has a way of setting you free, eventually. I was 29 when I moved to Willow Creek, Georgia. Small town. One blinking traffic light. Gas station, diner, Dollar General, and more churches than people, it seemed. I had just left my husband back in Alabama. He cheated on me with someone younger, tighter, prettier, whatever. We didn't have kids, and I didn't have much to take but a suitcase and a used Chevy Malibu. My Aunt Patty let me stay with her for a while. Her house was old but clean, and she made sweet tea so strong it could wake the dead. I spent most mornings on her front porch in a rocking chair, watching humidity steam off the grass. One Sunday morning, she handed me a dress and said, "Get up. You're coming to church. The Lord ain't gonna knock on the door, baby girl." That's how I ended up walking through the front doors of Gracelight Church. The building looked plain from the outside, white siding, faded sign, gravel parking lot, but inside, it felt different. Warm. Candles flickered on the altar. The choir sang with real fire. People clapped, swayed, cried. And standing in front of them all was Pastor James Sullivan. Tall. Clean-shaven. Not bad-looking for someone pushing 50. His eyes were deep-set and serious, but when he smiled, the whole room seemed to lean in. He didn't preach like the pastors I grew up with, no shouting or brimstone. He spoke with calm, conviction, and just enough charm to make you forget you were being scolded. I sat next to Aunt Patty, flipping through the bulletin. He noticed me. I felt it in the way his gaze paused ever so slightly as he scanned the congregation. After service, people lined up to shake his hand. I wasn't planning to join the line, but Patty nudged me hard enough to tip a cow. So I did. When I reached him, he smiled warmly and said, "First time here?" I nodded. "Yes, sir." "Welcome home, Ellie Mae." The way he said my name, like it belonged in a prayer, made something flutter in my chest. That week, I came back. And the next. I found myself volunteering to help with the food pantry, then the nursery, then cleaning the sanctuary on Thursdays. It wasn't long before I was there more than I was anywhere else. The people were kind, but it was him that kept me coming. Pastor James's wife, Victoria, was the first lady of the church. Always in elegant dresses, soft-spoken, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She ran the women's Bible study and organized charity drives. She was respected, admired, even, but I never felt warmth from her. Sometimes I caught her watching me. Nothing dramatic. Just watching. The pastor and I started having little moments. Conversations in the hallway. A touch on the shoulder that lingered too long. One afternoon after I finished organizing him books, he passed by and said, "You make this place shine, Ellie Mae. I hope you know that." I smiled, maybe blushed a little. "I'm just doing my part." He looked at me, not like a pastor should look at a volunteer. There was something else in his eyes. Something I didn't fully understand, but I felt it all the same. A week later, he asked if I could help him in the church office with some donation receipts. Said the secretary was out sick. I sat across from him in that tiny office, surrounded by filing cabinets and old sermon notes. He smelled like cedarwood cologne and peppermint breath mints. We laughed about typos on the donation envelopes. It felt natural. Easy. He told me I had a good heart, that God must have sent me to Gracelight. Then he said something that stuck with me. You ever feel like the Lord puts people in your life, exactly when you need them most? I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. He smiled. I'm glad you came here, Ellie Mae. More than you know. And just like that, I was hooked. I told myself it was innocent. That he was just kind. A mentor. A man of God who saw something in me I didn't see in myself. But deep down, I knew. I knew the way my heart beat faster when he said my name wasn't holy. I knew the way I reapplied lip balm before seeing him wasn't about chapped lips. I knew the way he looked at me wasn't right, and I liked it anyway. Aunt Patty warned me once, in her roundabout southern way. That man's got a silver tongue and a pretty wife. Don't go chasin' rain that ain't meant for your field. But I was already chasing. I thought I was walking into a church to find God again. Instead, I found a man behind a pulpit who made me feel seen. And that was the beginning of the end. If you had asked me then, I would have said I was just helping out, lending a hand to the church, being useful. That's what I kept telling myself. But deep down, I already knew I was falling for him. It started with little things. He'd leave sticky notes on my desk in the church office, simple, sweet notes like appreciate you, sunshine, or God sends the right people at the right time. Sometimes he'd call me Sunshine instead of Ellie. It made my chest bloom like a flower every time. Then came the late nights. Pastor James would ask me to stay after everyone left to finish up the ledgers or go over the donation logs. It always started professional. But time has a way of stripping down intentions. One Friday night in early spring, I stayed behind after a choir rehearsal. It was raining, the soft kind of rain that makes you feel like the world's holding its breath. He asked if I could help him organize old baptism certificates in the archive room behind the sanctuary. The air smelled like old wood and candle wax. He leaned over my shoulder to point at a folder, and his hand brushed my back. I froze. So did he. But neither of us moved away. Sorry, he murmured, barely audible. Didn't mean to. It's okay, I whispered. We stood there too close, for too long, until finally he said, Ellie Mae, you're not like the others. You understand me. You see me. Before I could even respond, he kissed me. It was soft. Careful. Like he was testing a boundary he already knew he'd crossed. And I kissed him back. I can't explain it. My whole body felt like it was on fire, but my heart was quiet. Like all the noise I'd been carrying for years, from my ex, from feeling lost, had suddenly gone still. He pulled away first. We shouldn't. I know, I said. But we did. That night was the first time we held hands behind the pulpit. That old church, with its creaking pews and stained glass windows, had never felt more sacred or more sinful. He texted me the next morning. I dreamed about you. I haven't dreamed in years. I knew it was wrong. He was married. He was a pastor. And I wasn't some naive teenager. But every time he looked at me like I mattered, like I wasn't invisible, I craved more. We became careful. Real careful. Victoria, his wife, started giving me colder glances. She'd stop talking when I entered a room. She began calling other women to lead events I used to handle. I thought maybe she just didn't like me. I didn't know then that she knew. Not yet. But she felt something. Pastor James and I found places to hide, the sound booth, the prayer closet, his office with the door locked. He'd say things like, God sees my heart. He knows this is real, and I wanted so badly to believe him. Once, after a night service, we met in the baptistry room. The lights were dim. He pressed his forehead to mine and said, I haven't felt alive in a long time, Ellie Mae. You remind me what it means to feel human. I told him I'd do anything for you. And that's when things changed. One evening he sat me down and said, "I need your help with something. It's delicate." I nodded, eager. "Of course." He pulled out a folder full of donation forms and cash drop records. "There are gaps. Errors. I've been meaning to reconcile things, but I'm stretched thin. I need someone I trust." "You trust me?" I asked, small and stupid. "With everything," he said, looking me in the eyes. I didn't question it. I wanted to feel needed. Wanted. I'd already given him my heart and my body, why not this? He showed me how to log the donations, how to round certain figures, how to move small amounts from one account to another to make things flow. He said it was temporary. That it was just to cover a shortfall in youth ministry funds. I didn't even blink. I said yes. That night, he kissed my hand and whispered, "You're saving this church, Ellie Mae." No one else noticed. Or maybe they didn't want to notice. The offerings kept flowing. The book stayed balanced, on the surface. Sometimes I asked him if he felt guilty. If he worried about Victoria. "She's checked out," he'd say. "We've been roommates for years. She doesn't understand me. Not the way you do." He made me feel like I was doing something noble. Like we were meant to find each other. Like maybe, just maybe, God had allowed it all. But guilt doesn't stay quiet forever. It bubbles beneath the surface, waiting. Victoria started watching me more closely. She'd come into the office when she didn't need to. She'd ask questions that sounded casual but weren't. Once, she cornered me after Sunday service. Her voice was calm but her eyes were ice. "You seem very close to my husband, Miss Carter." I smiled politely. "He's just been kind. This church saved me." She nodded slowly. "Yes. Saved a lot of people. But not everyone who walks into a church comes looking for salvation. Some come looking for attention." I didn't say anything. I just walked away, heart pounding. The cracks were forming. But I didn't stop. I was in too deep. You'd be amazed how quickly guilt can turn into greed, especially when you convince yourself you're doing it for love. By the time summer rolled in, Pastor James and I weren't just sneaking kisses in the church office. We were managing the books, and moving church money like it was our own. Little by little, week by week. It started small. An error here. A reallocation there. At first, I believed every word he said. That the youth retreat needed extra funding. That some families were quietly struggling and needed cash. That the church secretary, me, had the discretion to make those decisions. But it didn't stop there. Soon we were padding envelopes. Mislabeling checks. Writing fake receipts. And he always made it sound holy. "Money doesn't serve God sitting in a drawer, Ellie Mae," he'd say. "We're putting it to work. You're doing his work." I nodded like a child desperate for approval. I wanted to believe him. One evening, we were sitting in the back pew after hours, surrounded by silence and stained glass. He put his hand on my knee and whispered, "You trust me, don't you?" "With everything," I said. And I meant it. That night, we took our first real cut. A donation of $2,000 had come in from a wealthy church family, a couple that rarely showed up but gave big every Easter. Pastor James said they'd never notice $1,000 missing. "We'll use it for our future," he said. "Our future?" I whispered. He nodded. "You think I want to stay in this dusty town forever? One day, you and me, we'll be out of here. Somewhere warm. Somewhere free." I started dreaming about beaches and sunsets and not having to sneak around anymore. I stopped thinking about Victoria. About the altar. About God. I was all in. We set up a joint account, under a dummy name. He told me not to worry. Churches don't get audited unless someone talks. And no one's talking. But someone was watching. Victoria had grown quieter. More calculated. She started attending the finance meetings she used to ignore. She started smiling at me again, too wide, too perfect. Like a cat watching a mouse. One afternoon, she dropped a folder on my desk. Inside were 3 church donation logs, all from the same week, with red circles and question marks scrawled in neat handwriting. "Just curious," she said sweetly. "You wouldn't happen to know why these don't add up?" I stammered something about a spreadsheet glitch. She smiled. "Of course," she said. "I'd expect nothing less from someone as loyal as you." That night, I told James. He dismissed it with a wave. "She's bluffing," he said. "She's always looking for a reason to feel powerful." But I could feel it in my bones. Victoria wasn't bluffing. She was building something. Quietly. Patiently. Waiting for the perfect moment. And still, we didn't stop. By the end of July, we had taken over $12,000. Some of it went into savings. Some went into little motel getaways in the next town over. Some of it paid for a necklace James gave me, gold with a tiny cross. "So you always remember who brought us together," he said. But God wasn't in that cross. Guilt had stopped tapping on my shoulder. Now it was screaming in my ear. I started noticing people looking at me differently. Sister Marilyn, the choir leader, who used to hug me tight after every service. Brother Harold, who used to crack jokes, now barely nodded my way. One Sunday morning, while helping pass the offering plates, I saw an envelope that had my name scribbled across the front. Inside was a note written in tight script. "Nothing hidden stays hidden forever." Luke 12 verse 2. My hand shook. That night, I cried in Pastor James's arms, begging him to let us stop, to come clean, to find a way out. But his face hardened. "Do you think we're the only ones?" he said. "You think other pastors don't move money around? You think Victoria didn't build her little women's ministry on favors and secrets?" I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. And he kissed me, hard. Like he was trying to wipe the guilt off my lips. But the cracks were growing wider. One night in August, after a Wednesday night service, Victoria stayed behind. Said she wanted to talk. She sat across from me in the church office, her eyes cool and unreadable. "You're young," she said softly. "And stupid." I stiffened. She continued, "I've seen this happen before. You're not the first." "What are you talking about?" "Oh honey," she said, almost laughing. "You really thought you were special?" My chest turned cold. "You're just the latest distraction. He always finds one when things get boring. But the money? That's new. That's dangerous." "I haven't done anything wrong," I said, too quickly. She leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "Then you won't mind when the board reviews the accounts next week." I sat frozen. I knew then, she had something. Maybe not everything, but enough. She stood up and smoothed her skirt. "You should pray, Ellie Mae," she said. "Because forgiveness is harder to find than you think." When she left the room, I broke down sobbing. James found me minutes later, curled up under the desk. "She knows," I whispered. "She won't act on it," he said confidently. "She's bluffing again." But even he didn't sound sure anymore. And then, the very next Sunday, everything blew apart. They say nothing stings worse than betrayal exposed under church lights. But I'll tell you what's worse, being the center of it. The whispers. The stares. The moment a sanctuary becomes a courtroom and every soul turns judge. It happened on a Sunday morning. The sun was shining like it always did, but everything felt off. The air was heavy. The pews were too quiet. Even the choir's voices cracked like they knew a storm was about to roll in. Victoria wore red. She never wore red. Not to church. Not to anything. But that Sunday, she strutted down the center aisle like a queen walking to the gallows, but she wasn't the one on trial. I was. James preached like everything was fine. He even winked at me once from the pulpit. But something about his voice, it trembled, just a little. Like his tongue was fighting the truth sitting heavy on it. After the final hymn, Victoria stood up in front of the congregation. Nobody asked her to. Nobody stopped her. She walked up to the microphone slowly, calmly. "Before we dismiss," she said, smiling like a Southern debutante, "I think it's time we talk about what's really been going on in God's house." I felt my stomach drop. She opened a manila folder and pulled out papers. Receipts. Bank records. Photocopies of forged donation logs with my handwriting right there in black ink. "I have, in my hands, undeniable evidence," she continued, "of theft. Of lies. Of adultery committed not just against me, but against the Lord's house." Gasps broke out like thunder. Eyes turned toward me. I wanted to run. Disappear. Die. But she wasn't done. She held up a photo, grainy but clear enough. Me and Pastor James in a motel parking lot. He was kissing my neck. My hands were around his waist. No denying it. No escape. James stood up from the pulpit, face pale, lips parted. "Victoria," he said, trying to calm her. "This isn't the place." "No," she interrupted. "Because it sure was the place when you were stealing God's money and sneaking out behind my back." The church erupted. Some people stood. Some covered their mouths. Sister Marilyn fainted. Someone in the back yelled, "Is this real?" And then came the worst moment of all. Victoria walked down the aisle and stood right in front of me. She looked me dead in the eye. "You thought he loved you," she said, loud enough for the whole church to hear. "Honey, he's been doing this for years. You're not special. Just convenient." She tossed the folder in my lap, turned, and walked out the doors without another word. Silence followed. The kind that suffocates. Then the murmurs began. And just like that, I wasn't the sweet church volunteer anymore. I was the whore who stole tithes and slept with the pastor. I didn't go home that day. I couldn't. The whispers followed me into every aisle at the grocery store, every glance at the gas station, even online. People posted about me on Facebook like I was some character in a soap opera. They called me a Jezebel. A thief. A homewrecker. Some even said I should be arrested. James tried to call me that night. I didn't answer. What was there to say? That we were caught? That the fantasy was over? I sat in my tiny apartment, curled up on the couch, replaying everything in my mind like a slow-motion train wreck. What had I done? I wasn't that kind of woman, or maybe I was. I let myself fall. I told myself it was love. I thought we were different. But love doesn't empty offering plates. Love doesn't lie to a whole congregation. And love sure as hell doesn't leave you alone when the truth hits the fan. The church held an emergency meeting too. Days later. I didn't go, but the results spread fast. James was suspended. Not fired. Not yet. Just put under review. He gave a public apology from the pulpit the following Sunday. Said he was deeply sorry for betraying the congregation's trust. Said the devil had crept into his heart. Said he needed prayer. He never mentioned me by name. But I was the ghost in every pew. Victoria filed for divorce. Fast. Turns out she'd already been talking to lawyers for weeks, maybe even months. She had the paper trail ready. She had all the evidence. She left him with nothing but a parsonage bed and a reputation in ashes. And she didn't stop there. She started a new ministry, one for women harmed by spiritual abuse. She held her first meeting in the same sanctuary where she exposed us. 50 women showed up. 50. I watched the video online from my phone, alone. And I cried. Not because she was wrong, but because she was right. James tried to reach me again. He even came to my apartment once. Knocked on the door. I didn't answer. I watched from behind the curtain as he stood there in a wrinkled suit, flowers in hand, eyes hollow. He didn't look like a man of God. He looked like a man who had lost everything, and had no one left to blame. The board pressed charges for the embezzlement. The police came knocking soon after. I confessed everything. I didn't even get a lawyer. I told them the truth, that I loved him, that I helped him, that I thought we were building something together. They gave me community service and probation. Said I was young. Easily influenced. Said James would face harsher punishment. I didn't argue. I just wanted it to end. They say time heals all wounds. But they don't tell you about the scars, the ones that still ache when it rains, or when someone mentions church, or when you pass by people who used to hug you but now cross the street. I moved out of town 3 months after everything came crashing down. Packed a few boxes, said goodbye to nobody, and left behind the little Georgia church that had once been my home, my refuge, and then my ruin. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stay. I got a job waiting tables in Macon. Nothing glamorous. No offering baskets. No pews. Just tired faces, greasy menus, and the sound of sweet tea pouring into glasses. It was honest work, though. And that meant something to me now. Sometimes, I still think about James. He was sentenced to 18 months in state prison for embezzlement. I saw his mugshot in the news, no tie, no Bible, just a blank stare and a prison number beneath his chin. They let him speak at sentencing. He said he failed his church, his God, his wife. But not once did he mention my name. I wasn't surprised. In the end, I wasn't a woman to him. I was a means. A tool. A quiet accomplice he could mold into whatever fantasy kept his conscience asleep. Funny how the devil doesn't always show up in fire and brimstone. Sometimes, he smiles at you from the pulpit. I still remember the last thing Victoria ever said to me. It was 2 weeks after the church scandal. I was in line at the bank, trying to close my account before they froze it. She walked in wearing her usual pearls, head held high like she wasn't the woman whose life had been set on fire in front of a congregation. She saw me. I wanted to run. I actually turned to leave, but she stepped in front of me. "I don't forgive you," she said calmly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I pity you." I nodded, unable to speak. Then she leaned in and whispered, "He took everything from me. But he took something from you too, you just don't realize it yet." I didn't understand then. But now? I do. James didn't just steal money. He didn't just cheat. He stole who I thought I was. My kindness. My faith. My belief that people in power truly walked with God. And worst of all, he made me believe I deserved it. I'm rebuilding. Piece by piece. I go to therapy now. Twice a month. My counselor says I'm dealing with something called spiritual trauma, when your soul gets injured by someone you trusted with it. It's real. And it's slow to heal. I don't go to church anymore. Not yet. I pray sometimes. Quietly. Not to ask for things, but to whisper things I used to only tell James. I whisper things like, "Help me forgive myself." And, "Please let me believe again." Last week, a young girl came into the diner. Couldn't have been more than 21. She looked lost, nervous, like she hadn't eaten in a day. She said she just got out of a bad relationship. Said her family didn't want her anymore. She had nowhere to go. I gave her my number. Told her to call me if she needed help finding a place to stay. I bought her lunch out of my own pocket. After she left, one of the cooks joked, "You always pick up strays?" I just smiled and said, "No. Just the ones who remind me of myself." Because that's the truth. I know now that I can't change what happened. I can't undo the sin. can't unbreak hearts or clean stained reputations. But I can still be kind. I can still show mercy. And maybe, just maybe, I can be the kind of woman I used to pretend I was. They say ashes are what's left after fire consumes everything. But ashes can grow things too. The soil remembers. The roots find their way. And something new begins, something real. I'm not the pastor's mistress anymore. I'm just Ellie Mae Thomas. And this was my story. The end. These stories are raw, real, and meant to remind us we're not alone in our mess. Your support helps bring more voices to life. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another dramatic life story.